Hello, hello again, everyone. You have reached the disinformation session, and we are just making sure we're just getting our slides up and going. And we just want to tell you all how happy we are to have you here. And just to give you a heads up, you can see at the on your screen, you see how one of the screens says Win Divisible. That's going to be the slides where we're going to be sharing our content. And so if you want to see that larger, just double click on that window. I'm sure you've probably heard that several hundred times today already, but just to give everybody a heads up. So yeah, I see someone said the PowerPoint is back now. It is back. So everybody, it's well 2:30 my time. I'm talking to you from Colorado, 4:30 East Coast time. So I believe we are good to go. Everybody ready to get some truth? Yay! Yay! So. Excuse me a second while I take us into our presentation slides. Okay, so welcome again, everyone. We are so happy to have you here. Obviously, we're pretty sure you're here because you feel the same way we do about how critical it is in these times to get the truth out. And one of our primary goals in this session is to empower you and to make everyone realize that however dispiriting all of this disinformation we're seeing everywhere can be, the reason that we're here, the reason that we're all spending our time, and that we hope you will be too, is that there is a way to combat disinformation. And we're here to tell you the way. And also because we have some amazing partners who are going to be teaching us today, we're going to also be learning about what disinformation is and then how to fight it. Hint from the slide, the title of this presentation, we are leveraging people power to combat disinformation. That's how we do it. So this session is all about countering disinformation, misinformation, malinformation, propaganda, whatever you want to call it. We're talking about the onslaught of lies created for one purpose, and that purpose is to undermine our democracy. So I'm absolutely delighted to see all you patriots here, and because that's what you are. The reason for all this disinformation is one purpose. People create the propaganda in order to undermine our democracy. And when you undermine our democracy by confusing voters, that's what they want to happen. They want voters to be confused. This whole afternoon is all about getting out the vote, and fighting disinformation is foundational to that, because we need an informed populace in order to vote and in order to sustain our civilization. So before we jump in though, I should tell you that my name, the talking head talking to you right now, is Jody Ryan, and I'm an organizing manager with Indivisible and one of the co-founders of the Indivisible Truth Brigade, which is created to combat disinformation. And what we would all like to know is, what brings you here today? So if you wouldn't mind, we'd love to see you pop into the chat and just let us know a little bit about why you're fighting this good fight against disinformation and propaganda. So I'll be quiet for a minute while you tell us who you are and what brings you here. And also help you find the chat. Can everybody find the chat? 30 years in uniform to support and defend. Amazing. Frustration with Facebook. Scared for our democracy? Yes. QAnon is having a big impact. Oh my goodness. We care about the country. Help get out the vote in Texas. You guys, you are amazing already. I love our volunteers. Well, you keep on typing your reason. I'll share a little bit about my reason, and then we'll jump into some basics and move on. As I mentioned, I'm an organizing manager with Indivisible, and my work is, first, I support all the amazing, big-hearted, dedicated, tireless volunteers in the state of Colorado. That's where I do a lot of my organizing work, and then I'm also involved in several national programs with Indivisible. And the Truth Brigade is the one that is so near and dear to my heart, because for me, it's personal. I spent a lifetime before I joined Indivisible staff working in book publishing. And in book publishing, I respected the power of the written word. I saw how the potential for how damaging it can be, and the necessity to have trusted voices, because we can't all possibly know everything. We have to have voices that we can trust in leadership, in authority, and we can't be a nation that doesn't know what's true and what's not. So as I say, for me, it's both personal and professional. And it's essential to our civilization. So we've talked about some of the reasons that you're posting in the chat, which are just encouraging. We all get the importance of this. So without further ado, let's jump in. And again, thank you all so much for being here and welcome. Okay, so what we're going to do today, this is our quick agenda. We're going to have Kelsey Suter and Tim Chambers, who are our partners who spend their days every single day working on uncovering and fighting disinformation. This is their lives and their livelihoods, and I'm sure it's their personal passions too. And they're going to be helping us identify the threat, tell us what to look for, and then tell us how we fight back. And then I'm going to pop back on and talk to you about what you can do. Actually, Kelsey's going to be talking about that too. And we'll talk about the Indivisible Truth Brigade. And then we're going to close out this session with you taking a quick action just to give you a taste of what you can do as an individual with the Truth Brigade. So I'm so pleased to introduce to you Kelsey Suter and Tim Chambers, who are going to jump right into the meat of this program. And so take it away, Tim. They'll introduce themselves. And again, thank you all so much for being here. Can't wait to hear what they have to say.
Great. Kelsey, why don't you introduce yourself first?
Thanks. So my name is Kelsey Suter. I am a vice president at a political consulting firm in DC called GQR. I sort of came about disinformation in a weird way, as I think everyone does. I work on our international team, and so I used to work on political campaigns outside of the United States exclusively, and I was doing that from 2012 to 2016. And so we started to notice like things start to get a little wonky when we were doing digital strategies for some of our clients. We started to see foreign interference starting to take place. We started to see the impact of mis and disinformation in political campaigns. And so really, since 2016, GQR has had a digital practice that has been dedicated to applying some of what we learned abroad back here in the US. And so I am working with a team of researchers in this cycle to monitor for political disinformation and to help groups and individuals and activists figure out the best way to respond to that disinformation when they see it. So I'm very excited to be here. I think Indivisible is amazing.
Awesome. My name is Tim Chambers. I run the digital group for Dewey Square Group, which is a DC Democratic public affairs group. My team has had a special focus on countering disinformation for about the last 2.5 years, having worked with a number of different state and federal campaigns on this, as well as like major nonprofit national organizations. So super excited to be here for that side, but also that I've been the digital lead for Indivisible MoCo, Indivisible Group in Maryland, since about 2016. So super excited for the Windivisible Day overall and for this session in particular. So with that, let's go to the next slide and we'll dig in. So you're all here because you get the threat. You know how dangerous this is. I've seen in the comments just now how clearly this is top of mind to you. But we want to dig in a little bit deeper in this first section to talk through some definitions about disinformation and what to look for and the damage that it causes. And then Kelsey will finish this section going into kind of how we can fight that. And some very practical, real world ways that we can do that inside the Truth Brigade. So on the next slide, I'll start in on some of the definitions. So clearly the word disinformation is sort of the catch-all term, but to give it a real crisp definition, this is when people are purposefully sharing information that they have created, knowing that is false and with the intent of doing harm. So that is the umbrella term in a way for everything we're looking at. On the next slide, we'll look at the term misinformation, which some people think is just really the same thing or a synonym, but it actually has a specifically different meaning. So misinformation is false content as well being shared online, and it does harm, but it wasn't created to do so. Like, for instance, think when a news reporter just gets something wrong, or someone on social media posts something that at the time they thought was accurate, but they didn't really check, or for whatever reason it wasn't accurate. The content wasn't created to do harm, but still the amplification of that content and the spread of that content can be just as damaging as any other like as the worst of disinformation, but it is a slightly different sort of subphylum. And we list it here because there may be some slightly different tactics that we can talk about at the end about how you would counter each type. And on the next slide, we look at the term that you probably at least familiar with if you aren't in this space, which is malinformation. And even though this term may be something that you've not heard, it's probably the thing you've seen most. So this is a type of disinformation where by the barest technical accuracy, like the barest technical term, this is accurate. So think of something where it is misleading on purpose, but the content itself, like the in and out points of, say, a video, inside that video is accurate, but because it's out of context, it is clearly misleading. So if you'd have seen the entire video or a quote taken out of context, or if you'd seen the whole paragraph of that quote, you would see it was saying something other than what it appeared to be. In this case, malinformation is intentionally created to mislead, and it is intentionally spread to do harm. So these are those three different types of things that we will share, we will see being shared and counter. And we also look at the types of actors that do this. So you've probably heard the terms like bots and trolls, but okay, to give you another kind of pretty clear definition on these, bots or robotic accounts or scripted accounts are when someone has their social media accounts sort of tied into software that allows it to automatically post or tweet or retweet or share. If you, for instance, see this account online talking and you notice, wow, they've got like hundreds of posts a day. And if you kind of scroll down a little bit more, you look and you say, this is somebody that's posting without sleeping, like 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Well, that's not human, or that's not at least fully human. So you could consider all of those things like inauthentic, scripted accounts or bots. Trolls, sometimes people think trolls are just this angry internet person that's like wreaking havoc on my discussion group. Well, yeah, that can be. But the technical definition of trolls in this space are really organized humans trying to disrupt or spread disinformation. There are cases where troll groups or troll sets of people are specifically paid. In other cases, it's just a purely organized effort trying to disrupt. So those are kind of some at least basic definitions we think could be helpful to you. But one thing that we always counsel in a way is don't overthink it. So definitely don't overlook it. Don't go too deeply to wonder, well, is this a bot? Or don't be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna like find out, is this, what variant of troll are we looking at? Really, it's not important beyond the idea that all of those you could put under an overall rubric of suspicious or bad actors. And that is what we are countering, the suspicious and bad actors and their tactics. So with that, we're going to go into sort of some of their tactics and how they are doing what they're doing and what we're countering. So on the next slide, we'll talk through kind of the networks that they're forming. Cool, almost. Cool, next one over, please. Great, so here what you can see is that in the right wing has spent millions of dollars creating a giant message machine to share, among other things, disinformation. That could be hundreds and thousands of posts by hundreds of accounts, and they work across many, many networks. And we're going to go into that next. Great. Next one more, please. So this is sort of what I was saying, that there's the ability to do sort of massive repetition across these different networks of accounts. And on the next slide, we'll kind of dig into some of those. So here is an example where you can see bad actors that are taking one message, that the Floyd protests and the various Black Lives Matter protests were not in the spirit of Martin Luther King, or where they were in various ways like violent mobs, etc. There's huge amounts of disinformation in that space that we're tracking. And here you can see how that same message, either verbatim or the framing of those messages, can be repeated not just across different accounts, but across different platforms. So that will go through Twitter, through Facebook, Reddit, Instagram, etc. And on the next slide, we'll talk through kind of some of the reasonings for how they do that. They also do use hyper-local networks. They know, disinformers know, that you're more likely to trust something that your friend shares with you that is, say, from a local news source or something that at least appears to be local, rather than from a distant site you've never heard of, or at least doesn't even appear to be local. So they've invested a great deal of time in creating many sort of silos of networks and groups that either are or appear to be super localized, down to states, down to cities. Some examples you can see in this next slide. So collectively, we've been tracking massive amounts of groups on Facebook, among other net platforms, that are targeting reopen, like say reopen states or reopening schools. Groups that are, again, appear to be local, that are militia-related groups, down to individual cities. White supremacist groups, pro-Trump groups, anti-vax groups. All of these are designed and created to spread disinformation rapidly and to be able to do it in a very, very local way. And on the next slide, we'll talk about a little bit more what they're trying to accomplish. All of this is trying to create what in essence is topic momentum. That is when a conversation is happening, and at least you would be forgiven if you looked at it and thought that it was completely natural. But if it makes, we're trying to make it clear that in many of these cases, this is artificially manufactured. It's designed to appear to be something with genuine topic momentum, even though it can be, you know, entirely scripted, created, and inauthentically coordinated. So on the next slide, take a look, and we'll give you a very real-world example. So here, you could see the topic of vote by mail being artificially propped up to be with the claims that it is fraudulent, rife for error, untrustworthy, and corrupt. The right wing and the message machine behind it, both real and artificial, are continually pushing that theme. And you could see how these spikes occur and reoccur and then again. Our efforts are to push back on things like this and how to correct the record and to move things where people can go to trusted sources to find real information on these topics. And what I would also say in general at this point, when you look at all the actors and all the kinds of networks and their goals, note too that this is all fundamentally manufactured. And a very key theme for us in this session, and from my view for Indivisible overall, is that real human organizing beats that. So real voices sharing real content with authentic comments shared from your heart, I mean, is the type of organizing that Indivisible's always done. And what we're talking about is how to now do that online, counter this. Indivisible has, you know, all our different groups, all our different Indivisible accounts, and then all our personal accounts as Indivisible organizers that have been created years and years ago, have built trust, have built real relationships, and it is these voices that can do the countering to this disinformation. And very excited about that. And Kelsey will give, on the next slides, Kelsey will give the broad structure of how we're doing that, the best practices on how to do that, and then we're going to go into how Truth Brigade's already been doing that. So thanks.
Thank you, Tim. Tim gets the hard job of presenting all the scary stuff, and then I get to come in and sort of pump everyone back up. So it works well for me. You can go ahead to the next one, Jody. Okay, so, as Tim said, we have facts on our side, we have people on our side, and so now we're going to talk through how we can actually fight back against all this craziness on the internet. And let me just start by saying there's no like one silver bullet. I wish there were, but there are just a whole lot of people who are fired up about this, including you all who are seeing what's going on in this country. And so we're excited to be able to use mobilization, and we think it is more powerful than bad actors realize, and I think this can help a lot. 2020 is already a very unique year, and disinformation has been crazier than ever in a lot of ways. I'm sure you all are seeing this. So winning in 2020 is going to require us to start inoculating our networks. And I know inoculate is sort of an insidery jargon word, but all it means is helping to stop disinformation in its tracks by preventing people from buying into the misleading junk that they are inevitably going to see online. The same way you get inoculated against a disease, we want to inoculate people against disinformation. Go ahead, Jody. So in order to inoculate, we are going to first think about where people are spending their time online. A lot of news coverage that deals with any sort of social media trends or disinformation really focuses on Twitter. You will see like a lot of news coverage of Twitter. And Twitter is really important, in part because it's where a lot of journalists and like thought leaders spend their time. There's a lot of news happening on Twitter. But it's really important when you look at this chart, you can see that only 22% of Americans really use Twitter at all. Regular voters are spending their time on platforms like Facebook and Instagram and YouTube, not really on Twitter. So about 70% of Americans say that they use Facebook. So when we start to think about how to push back on disinformation and which platforms that are going to be the most effective to push back on disinformation, we want to have that in mind. Tweets are good, but Facebook is even better because that's where real people spend their time. So we've thought about the platforms. Now I want to talk for a second about algorithms. Algorithms are sort of the secret sauce behind who sees what on social media. They decide what you see, what Tim sees. The algorithm is how Facebook knows that I'm going to watch every single one of those 5-minute videos of recipes that show up on my feed. I will watch the whole thing start to finish. The algorithms help to predict what we see, and they are largely driven by engagement metrics. So what that means is that every like, comment, share, even if it's an angry face on Facebook or a comment to argue or debunk something, that is still engagement. And that tells the algorithm, hey, Facebook, we should show this to more people because people are really engaging with it. So we think it's very interesting to people. So let's make sure that we prioritize this in people's news feeds. So every time you engage with a piece of content, you are granting the platforms permission to show it to more people who might not have seen it before. And so that is why the #1 rule of fighting disinformation is to never amplify a false claim. We never want to amplify something that we don't want to spread, and we almost never want to even engage with it directly if that content contains false or misleading information. And that means not even to debunk it. I know that that goes against a lot of people's instincts, and if you start to look for this, you will see that a lot of people who should know better, like a lot of politicians, a lot of journalists, make this mistake a lot. They will quote tweet something that they want to argue against or post something that they disagree with to talk about why they disagree with, but that engages with that content and helps it spread further. And the reason this matters is because a lot of disinformation starts out in these really partisan echo chambers, and we want it to stay there. We don't want it to move into more mainstream spaces. So let's talk instead about what the options are to safe and effectively counter disinformation. We have a lot of options when it comes to countering disinformation that don't require us to amplify. So there are ways that you can acknowledge that lies exist, but then you should pivot to your core message. So something like Trump is spreading unfounded lies that are dangerous, but the truth is blah, blah, blah. That way you're never saying what the lies are. You can just undercut him and get the truth out. Part of this is also about discrediting messengers. Anyone who has ever gotten into like a Facebook argument about something that they think is wrong or false knows that they tend to just devolve into this back and forth forever about people arguing about specific claims and facts. It can get really exhausting to get into one of those arguments, and it's not very helpful. So instead, it's often better to discredit a messenger entirely. And by that, I don't mean like attack the person, your like friend or family member who shared something, but the messenger where this stuff is coming from, the source where this started. Sometimes you can't track that down, that's fine, but if someone's sharing a news article from a very partisan source, you can talk about that source's history of lying or spreading bad information. You can, and to do this, it's really important to talk about motives and what people are trying to do when they say this stuff. So something like Trump is spreading lies because he's scared he's going to lose his election. That's one way of discrediting a messenger. If the messenger is Trump, you can say that source has a history of spreading false information to attack political candidates, things like that. You know, we can also organize around a message that we want to spread and ask people to all share a positive message, like have a bunch of people in your networks talk about why they're voting for a specific candidate or why they're voting absentee, sort of organizing around something corrective. Sometimes we might hear that someone is spreading disinformation, but it might not be reaching too many people yet. So in that case, we might just want to go ahead and organize a proactive message before that bad stuff has a chance to break through. And then sometimes it can help to just share content directly into Facebook groups to reach new people. Facebook is also sort of playing around with Facebook groups and is going to start putting content from groups into more people's news feeds. I know that some groups have rules against political posts, so you kind of only want to post things that are appropriate and relevant for a group. So like check the rules before you start posting political stuff in your gardening groups, for example. But those less partisan spaces can be great for reaching people in the middle. And I am just going to be really clear about something. There's no one-size-fits-all approach, and there's space for everyone to fit into this. If you are more comfortable sending text messages or emails, making phone calls, sending written letters, writing letters to the editor, all of that is fine too. We're focusing a lot on social media for the sake of this presentation because that is where so much of this takes place. But I would encourage all of you to fight back on whatever battlefield or platform makes the most sense for you. And we would all rather have you making calls and sending letters than not be in this battle at all. So on the next slide, yes, so the big picture solution here is trust. Trust is at the core of all of this. Disinformation thrives in part because people don't know which sources of information to trust or what to believe. A lot of people in the United States right now and all over the world don't trust their leaders or their media or their institutions. And so we need to rebuild trust for those institutions and those people. But in the meantime, we do still trust our friends and family for the most part. And so meaningful engagement online can help you build trust with your networks, and it can help you, inoculate the people in your network and build up this immunity against disinformation. Your friends and family are more likely to believe a message if it's coming from you than if it's coming from some political elite or some source they don't know. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here. Trust is like at the heart of what Indivisible does. That's again why you all are such a critical part of this movement. And so we are going to use that trust that you all have with the people who are in your lives and in your social media networks, and we're going to build on it and use it to counter disinformation. So one way to build trust is through two-way engagement on this next slide here. Two-way engagement is how digital strategy people talk about this, but it just means like communication is a two-way street. In relationships, at work, when we're fighting for progressive causes online, communication works both ways. And so what we mean by that is it's really important to talk with people, not at them, especially when you're trying to explain to someone that something they believe or have posted is wrong. We don't want to make it sound like we're talking down to them. Disinformers are really good at exploiting fear and confusion and anger, and so it's really important to make things a conversation. We have to meet people where they are. A lot of disinformation gets shared because people are confused or angry. So it's important to acknowledge the source of that frustration and then provide them some alternative options to express that frustration. Like you could encourage them to share good information instead, or send letters to their lawmakers, or join Truth Brigade. Being transparent and authentic is also key here. It's okay to say, hey, I saw this the other day and I totally thought it was true also, but I did some digging and it turns out there's more to this story. Let me share something with you. It's also really important that any of these conversations you get into online that you listen as much as you talk. I might be sounding a little bit like I'm giving relationship advice, not disinformation advice, but it's true in both places. We want to bring as many people into the fold as possible, and you all are already expert organizers and really good at communicating with the people in your lives. Okay, so on this next slide, we are going to recap some of what we know really quickly. We know that we are up against a lot. We know that we never want to amplify or accidentally spread disinformation because algorithms drive everything on social media. We know that progressive candidates and causes need us as people with trusted voices to fight back as a collective movement. We know that most of the people we need to reach are on Facebook, and we know that restoring trust is our big picture strategy. And the reason, I think you gotta go one more, there we go. The reason all that is helpful is because once we know that and we built that trust, we can really fight back in powerful ways. Tim talked about how in-network disinformation is the most dangerous, the way things spread through friends and family, or these in-group dynamics, these Facebook groups, the way they get coordinated to spread organically across social media. So bad actors know how this works, and they are trying to get people to share disinformation through friends because that's the most effective. It's why they've invested so much effort into building up all the infrastructure that Tim talked about. We don't have the same infrastructure on our side. I will just be honest about that. But we also don't need to rely on artificial tactics to make our messages stick. We have real people. So real people are the infrastructure that we are working with. Indivisible's existence is representative of this. What Indivisible does is really unique and really important for this reason. So I'm going to show a couple slides of some examples of what this can look like when we harness people power to do this the right way. So this next example here is one that I happen to like a lot. I went to school in Minnesota and have some Minnesota connections, and so I love to see Minnesotans organizing on social media. If anyone here is from Minnesota, shout out. Back in April, you all remember we started to see all kinds of these reopen the economy protests that were popping up all over the country. And there was this one day where there was this protest at the governor's mansion in Minnesota, and President Trump tweeted in all caps, "Liberate Minnesota." Minnesotans did not like this a whole lot. And so a bunch of them immediately responded on Twitter using the phrase "as a Minnesotan." And so instead of amplifying or repeating Trump's crazy tweet or Trump's support of the protest, we instead saw people on Twitter saying things like, "As a Minnesotan, I'm thankful to have a governor who understands how to protect my state." Or, "As a Minnesotan, the only thing I want to be liberated from is you." A lot of like Prince graphics and memes because Minnesota, but all of this was just a really creative way that people organically took over that conversation online to get the message out that people in Minnesota opposed reopening the state and supported their state's approach to fighting the virus. And then on the next slide, we have another great example that's actually from Indivisible. Shout out to any Indivisibles in Colorado. Indivisibles in Colorado started this and have already done some of this. So Senator Cory Gardner in Colorado, who's up for re-election this year, is known for sharing things that aren't exactly true online. He and his supporters often misrepresent his record to make him seem like he's a better advocate for Minnesota or for Coloradans than he actually is. So the chapters there organized a convening to plan a counter response. So we gave them a similar training to this one and then applied it in real time on a Zoom call with them. So members of Indivisible in Colorado started posting their own content about Cory Gardner, just telling the truth about his record and what he actually stands for and what he has done with his time in office, using the hashtag #TheRealCoryGardner. So together in one afternoon, one chapter was able to organize 34 different social media posts, 34 different social media accounts, 121 social media posts, and this got more than 440,000 impressions, which are just views. Anytime something shows up in a newsfeed, that's an impression. So 440,000 impressions off of one afternoon of one Indivisible chapter. That is what we call using people power to counter disinformation. And so that became our pilot Truth Brigade, and we'll talk about the big version of the brigade here in a minute. Yeah, sorry, those examples are a little small. Okay, so if you all are ready to learn a little bit more, I'm going to send this back over to Jody.
Everybody again. And yeah, sorry, I almost gave away a secret slide. And thanks all of you for your patience with some of our tech issues here. We had an emergency slide presenter switch at the end and my finger's not so delicate on the slide advancement trigger. So I really appreciate all your patience. And I just want to say thank you to Kelsey and Tim. I know we'll hear from you again, but that was pretty amazing, marvelous, truthful information, wasn't it? it can also be a little overwhelming. And even with what you've just learned, you may be wondering, but what can I really do? Right? The machine is so powerful. I really want you to absorb this. Not only can disinformation be beat, but we, the indivisible army of grassroots volunteers, are the best possible means to defeat it. You can't beat bots with bots. You beat bots with people, people in community, people amplifying the same truthful message authentically together. And that's what the Indivisible Truth Brigade is. In a second, Tim will share with you the power of the brigade. It's only been in existence about 6 weeks, and you guys are going to get blown away by what it's done already. But for now, I just want to show you the power of the person. And this is from a walk I took this morning. So on my walk, I saw this down the street. I live in a kind of a reddish neighborhood. It's moving purplish, but it's kind of reddish. When you look at this walking down the street, if you want to just pop in the chat, can you see what the, I guess we might call it misinformation. I'm not really sure what the category would be, but what's the message that you see being sent here? I'll just pause for a minute while you take a look at this and maybe pop in the chat. What do you think this message is? What do you think the message is? And what's false about it? Got it, Rosie Posey. Republicans are patriots and Democrats are not. Yep. Yep, Trump supports Gardner. Well, Trump does support Gardner, so that's actually true. But yeah, the message is, it's not really too subtle, but it's what the Trumpians and the supporters have been doing month after month, year after year. They're saying, we are the patriots. We are the Americans. We're wrapping ourselves up in the American flag. So I was feeling a little bit despair and also kind of thinking, well, what can I do? Should I just make an announcement to the whole neighborhood? But it turns out I didn't have to, because I walked a few steps down and look what I saw. I know, it gives me goosebumps to look at it. I mean, easy peasy, right? That's combating disinformation, person to person. So with that, I'll send this back over to Tim, who can tell you about the Truth Brigade and the stats we have online.
Great. So as Kelsey mentioned, she talked about the very first project in Colorado that was the first trial. So we've been ongoing since then, and the total that we've been able to see so far is over 1,424 Truth Brigaders are actively onboarded and in our Slack channel and very active in all of our Truth Brigade campaigns. We've had, in the total online conversation, this has generated over 2.7 thousand unique accounts so far, taking part and helping counter disinformation online. And collectively, we've done over 6,000 posts across all the different campaigns that we've done. And on the next slide, I'll show you kind of what that's done. So when you add that entire conversation, and you can see it charted here from the very first Colorado effort to every week's effort since, over 25.7 million impressions. So that's 25.7 million times that these posts have gotten into this conversation to counter disinformation, to point towards trustworthy information, and to really do all the things that we've talked about in this deck. And truthfully, I believe we are really still just hitting our sprints. So I think that you will see an incredible amount of work in the next weeks leading up to the election, and I cannot really imagine more important work. Okay, so I think, Jody, is that now you, or would you like?
I was thinking I was so excited by what Tim was saying. I was thinking I was going to ask you all to join us right then and there. But before I do, I'll just quickly tell you an overview of what the Truth Brigade does. So the Truth Brigade is open to any indivisible member, leader, activist, bring your friends. There's a process that you'll go through to become a member. It's not a very intensive one. It's not a very difficult one, but it does help us keep the Truth Brigade secure. Everybody on this call, join us. You're welcome. How do we work? We form an ever-growing army of truth tellers. together with Kelsey and Tim and Jake, who you haven't met here, but our partners who, as I said, are studying this all the time, they help us come up with a very specific campaign that we are going to counter with our message. And then together we create a message, we personalize the message, we share it, and we amplify it across the nation. So the message comes from Kelsey and Tim and Jake. And then I say, then the people in the brigade, make sure it's authentic and send it out. Then we track what we've done, and then we do it all over again. So, and we launch these campaigns every 2 weeks. And once you're in the brigade, we'll be providing you with the very specific step-by-steps of what that looks like. But do rest assured that we provide some very specific information about exactly how to do this, exactly what the messages are. How do I join the Truth Brigade, Phil? I'm in love. That's exactly the right question. So we're going to pop a link, and we're going to ask everybody right now to join us. And I'm going to grab the link. I'm going to move ahead a couple of slides so I can grab it. So excuse me 1 second. And I will pop it in the chat. Let's see, unless Carly, if you're here and helping us, it's act.indivisible Truth Brigade. Actually, I'm gonna move us forward a couple slides because I actually have it written on a slide at the end, so you guys get a preview of what's happening. There we go. So I'm going to click on this, and then, oh, thank you, Kelsey, you got it. So I'm going to take a minute and ask all of you to click on that link and go ahead and join us. So I'll be quiet for a minute. After you've clicked on it and joined us, pop back in and let us know you joined. And again, once you join, you'll be getting an email, and then that email will tell you what next steps to take. Join us, come along. Thank you, Angela. I'm glad you joined last week. Yay, the link disappeared. It's up in the chat here. Oh, you're looking for it on the slideshow? Kelsey's going to keep popping it in. Yay, thank you all. I'll move us on so that we continue to have time. So after you joined, yay, thank you all. So the question is, should we start now? The answer, of course, is yes. And Kelsey's going to take us through a kind of a mini version of what we'll be doing in the Truth Brigade. And bear with us again, because it might take us a second to give you some links that you need, but we will be with you shortly. So Kelsey, you want to take over?
Yes. So I think you can go ahead to the next slide. We normally, when we do this with the Truth Brigade, we have sort of a topic and we let people sort of craft their own messages, and it takes a little bit of time. But in the interest of time, we wanted to try a little sneak peek easy version of this. And so one thing we were thinking about is that, there's a lot of disinformation that's out there right now. There are a lot of bad claims that need correcting. We spend a lot of our time as a group just trying to decide what disinformation is the most important thing for us to correct right now. So we thought for this, what actually might be better is trying to make the solution a little bit bigger than fighting any one specific piece of disinformation. We already know that we need to prime people to be skeptical and to think about what they are seeing on social media. So one way we can start to spread some truth right here, right now, is by just reminding the people in our social media networks that disinformation is out there and giving them some tips to help them be better consumers of social media. So Jody, I think, is going to drop a link into the chat. And we have posts that Indivisible just posted on Facebook and on Twitter right now. And so if you all want to, you can go share those links right now with your own networks. And so we'll send both Facebook and Twitter posts. We encourage you all to tailor these, personalize them, quote tweet and put your own message in there, whatever you think makes sense. Maybe you want to talk to your networks about the fact that just this week there has been so much bad information on social media, and so you are trying to be better. We're 1 month out from the election. It's really important that we all stay really vigilant to disinformation, and maybe you want to encourage your networks to do the same thing. If you want to go to the next slide, Jody. Here, some of you are saying you don't really use social media or you're not really sure what to do with this. So we're going to post some of these links. I can do that right now. You have a few options for what to do with these. You can be an amplifier, which just means you engage with them in some way. You like them or comment or share them yourself. You can message your friends with either these posts themselves or some of, if you just want to write out those 5 things in a message to friends, you could do that. You can ask 3 friends, you can send this to 3 friends and ask them to share those posts or invite them to join the Truth Brigade. Whatever you want to do with these posts, we leave it up to you, but this is an example where we can all organize around one piece of content and share it with our networks and try to help prime some skepticism so that people really know how to be good consumers of social media going forward. I will give that back to you, Jody, from here.
Yeah, so please post in the chat after you've shared the message. We really appreciate it. And obviously, when we're doing this in real time, what's going to happen is you will get a 1-page or 2-page explainer sheet with a basic message and then instructions on how to personalize it. And then you can take that message and you can share it if you're on, any social media that you're on. So in Ask in the Chat, oh, thank you. The folks who are posting it. Yay. That's wonderful. Yeah, it's so exciting to see because every single action you take, the minimal action, one person doing one thing in one place, it spreads, it's not just one person. It makes me think of the phone banking we're going to be doing later. You talk to one person on the phone, you're actually reaching 10 people because of their network. It's the same thing with this. So just so appreciative of what you're doing here. What I was saying was that with the explainer that you get, you'll be able to take that information and it's truthful. It's not like on the other side, they take fake information and they reprint it all over the place. And even if it's a person doing it, it's still not authentic. It's still not real. There's nothing wrong with sharing a truthful message that someone else gives you and then putting your own reason that it's important to you. So you'll get these explainers and then you'll share them online and off, wherever it makes sense to you. If you have a conversation and you're sharing the message, that's making an impact. So thank you all so much for everything you're doing right now. And let's see, I think we're at the next steps part. And oh, thank you, Chloe shared it. This is wonderful. Let's see. Oh, Tom has offered to help. So Tom, you know what, I'm going to take a second here before we jump off. We have just about 3 minutes left in our session. And before we jump off, I just want to let folks know that once you join the Truth Brigade, you'll be funneled into a communications platform. And in that communications platform, we have a special channel called Staff Questions or Ask the Staff. I can't remember what it is, but that's where we're all on there, as well as a lot of other people from Indivisible who are staff support for the Truth Brigade. And that's where you can ask us direct questions. If you're able to help, it's wonderful. Once you're in this communication platform, you will see volunteers helping volunteers in everything. I mean, it's 1,400 people. It's just amazing. And everybody's jumping up to help and share ideas. So that's a really great place for you to communicate with us and with your fellow Truth Brigaders. Mary, thank you so much for sharing on Twitter too. We're just so happy to have you. Our next steps, real straightforward, join the brigade. We've talked about that a lot. Then you'll get an email that tells you how to participate. It'll send you into this communication platform we're talking about. And we'll be sharing, as I said, future further methods of communication. We'll provide clear instructions. We launch campaigns every 2 weeks, just to let you know. And when we launch those campaigns, we do them in a call like this. It's a Zoom call. And so, again, that's another way that we'll connect with you personally. And that's the second and fourth Wednesday of every month. And so lots of ways to do this, make it personal, and make a real measurable difference in the climate that's out there now. Because in order to get our democracy back, we need to start with the truth. So on that note, I'll thank everybody and let you all go on to your next session with deep gratitude. And Kelsey and Tim, if you want to say anything before we jump off.
Just thanks for everything you are doing. We are exactly 1 month out. It's going to be a crazy month, and just really appreciate you all taking the time to help us fight all of the craziness we're going to see for the next 31 days.
Yeah. So thanks, everybody.
It's great. Thanks, everyone.
Mm-hmm.